The Oklahoma Sooners landed a linebacker, adding to the depth. We'll talk about Konnor Near on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. We're free and available on all podcast platforms, and shout out to the everydayers, the Everyday Club, people tuning in to Locked On Sooners every day. We got a commitment to talk about and so many other things Oklahoma related. We're going to bring on a good friend of the show, Preston Gant. You know him from the PG show, and we're going to bring him on right now, man. Preston, what's going on, buddy?
What's going on, guys? I'm excited to be on.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. So let's get into it, man. Konnor Near, Ferris State linebacker, D2, making the jump up, not just to D1, but Power 5, big-time Oklahoma football. And Preston, we'll start with you, man. What do you think of Konnor Near, his game, what he brings to the table?
Yeah, well, and just in terms of starting off at D2 and getting to make the jump to, like you said, just Power 5 football, not even just D1 football, that's pretty nice. But I think this is going to add some much-needed security for Venables and Roof in this linebacker room, because you're bringing in three stellar freshmen in Samuel Masigo, Lewis Carter. Both of those guys, I think, could play in the fall for you. They're not going to be a Kobe McKenzie or Kip Lewis type situation, but a Phil Picchiotti, a guy I think that probably needs to sit through the season, probably to put on some good strength weight, if that makes sense. And then you never know if Kobe McKenzie or Kip Lewis are actually going to turn out. I can't remember who said it, but somebody was talking about it on their podcast the other day, and they basically said, they look good in spring, but what if they don't look good in the fall? So basically, this is just giving you more depth at that position, more pieces to turn to if somebody else isn't panning out. So I really like it in terms of that. He had good production at Ferris State, and Brandon Drum put on Twitter, he said, in an interview with Konnor Near, he said, "My linebacker coach told me that if I get a call from Coach Venables, that I better take it. 4 days later, here I am." So it doesn't get much better than that for the Oklahoma Sooners.
Well, and I think my reaction to it, Preston, was, look, if there's, and there should be a lot of them, defensively especially for Brent Venables, but if there's one position group that Brent Venables and Ted Roof jointly sign off on sending out an offer, it's linebacker that Oklahoma fans should say, okay, well, let's trust that Brent Venables knows a little something or two about linebacker play. And so for me, that was the first thing here. And then it's just the great experience, the national championship experience, which, look, I get it. Some folks probably aren't going to get totally past the Ferris State portion of this. But to me, man, I just think, jump from high school to college football, multiple national champion. And I like the tape. I get it. I get it's not tape against the Texas Longhorns or the Horned Frogs or the Michigan Wolverines. I am aware, but it looks good. It looks good. He's got a nose for the football. So to me, if this is nothing more than, hey, you add depth to add depth and you help your practice numbers, then by all means, bring somebody in Konnor Near that's 6'2", 235. I mean, he looks the part, Sean. So to me, this is an exciting get for Oklahoma. It would not have been at the top of the, I think Oklahoma's going to add board, but here we are.
You got to start somewhere, and not everybody is going to go the direct path to, Power 5, football program to the NFL. A lot of guys, they're going to find, they got to find a different route sometimes. And Konnor Near found that route. I just went and Googled real quick the best, D2 players that are currently in the NFL. Adam Thielen played at Minnesota State. John Brown, who made a living as a little wide receiver for Arizona. Austin Eckler, one of the best running backs in the NFL right now. Another big time D2 prospect. So it's not just that he's a D2 player. Like, have an open mind a little bit to what Oklahoma's getting here. And as Preston mentioned, it's important depth for a roster that is very, very young at linebacker, and probably the position that most people are saying, like, Where's the transfer portal addition at linebacker aside from Dasan McCullough? Because you need some depth at inside linebacker because you don't really have it past Danny Stutzman. You're expecting Jaren Kanak to make a jump and become a big-time player. You're hoping that Kobe McKenzie and Kip Lewis add rotational, depth to your linebacker core. But what happens if they're just not ready for big-time college football just yet? I mean, they're still just sophomores, these guys. They've only been at the college football level for now a year and a half. So they're still working their way into big time college football. It takes time. So you add a piece like that, you're still getting Shane Witter back. I mean, that'll be an important depth piece as well. But you had to do something in the transfer portal. And this is a kid that was very highly sought after. I mean, he had offers from Georgia Tech, Duke, Michigan State, Cincinnati, Texas Tech. So, I mean, it may not be Bama and Georgia, Ohio State, but those are some solid Power 5 programs that would have loved to add this kid, and Oklahoma got him, and potentially as one of their, third, fourth, maybe fifth linebackers on the roster.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. Yeah, Shane Witter. I love him in that linebacker room. I think he is one of the linebackers that I would really like to see get some playing time this year. And I think, with a lot of these guys, it's going to be situational per the team you're playing, because Shane Witter, it's like that speed. If you have that speed at the linebacker position, yeah, Shane Witter has a chance to start out. But yeah, no, I think Konnor Near, he has an opportunity to break out and be a undervalued person in the transfer portal for the Oklahoma Sooners, which, I'm going to trust BV because he did it at Clemson all the time. He finds hidden talent that nobody else is looking at and turns them into NFL prospects. So,
well, we are hanging out tonight, as you can tell, with let's just call him the PG show, where you can check him out on YouTube. It's Preston Gant that's in the house with us. I believe content creators should support other content creators. So for those of you that love listening and following us here on Locked On Sooners, please check out the PG show on YouTube as well. Preston, I think this sort of naturally leads us down the avenue of, okay, so what do you get in Konnor Near? We've talked about that, but the overall linebacker room as a whole, what do you make of it? Danny Stutzman obviously leads the Big 12 in tackles last year, though I think there's a faction of the fan base that wants something more from Danny Stutzman. So just where are you at with defensively, where Oklahoma and Brent Venables, where do they have this linebacker room top to bottom right now?
Well, we talked about it in the green room, but the spring game, I got to see some of these linebackers look a little bit sharper this year. And so that's what I'm hoping we see throughout the summer and the fall, is they continue to fine tune their ability to communicate on defense and communicate to each other where they need to be at on the field when there's shifts on the offense and things like that. That's what I'm looking for, because last year they showed glimpses of being good, being great. And then they would just a couple plays or a couple drives and they would just look lost out there. Like they didn't know what they were doing. So with Danny Stutzman, I want to see him take a leadership role this year, especially in that linebacker room. I'm not saying he's got to go win it, but I'd like to see him put up a butt kiss type season. I think he has that potential in him, but he's really going to have to spend time in the film room. He's going to have to spend time on the practice field. And if he does that with Venables, Venables can turn him into that. I'm really excited to see Kobe McKenzie, because we've all seen the pictures of Kobe McKenzie next to Kenneth Murray as, I think it was a recruit. I'm excited to see him. I'm excited to see what he's able to bring us. I'm excited to see this cheetah this year, because you have, I think, so many different dynamics at that position with Dasan McCullough, or we've heard Peyton Bowen could potentially play that role, or Reggie Pearson, or Justin Harrington, who we've had on the podcast many times that talks about that cheetah position. But the linebacker position to me is so interesting, because you have two freshmen, I think, that are coming in this year, and Sammy Omosigo and Lewis Carter, who I think could be key players on that linebacker room. They're going to drive Danny Stutzman. They're going to drive Kobe McKenzie and Jaren Kanak and all of these guys that have been here for at least a year to be the best that they can be, because Sammy Omosigo and Lewis Carter, they can steal your job.
Yeah, they're legit dudes. And Brent Venables can't talk highly enough of Lewis Carter. I feel like every time that he's asked about the linebacker position, he makes sure to mention Lewis Carter and what he could potentially bring. I remember he did it at the spring game, in the spring game post conference. He mentioned a guy that wasn't even there yet. So I think that just speaks highly of what Lewis Carter is going to bring to the table. Tampa Catholic graduate. That's going to be a really exciting, the dude's just a really good football player. Like he did everything for Tampa Catholic, and he did it really, really, really well. So it's a very, very intriguing name. And then, Parker Thune, our guy that we've had on the show several times, he can't speak highly enough of Samuel Masigo. He says that's a kid that's probably going to come in ready, like physically ready to play and be a contributor as a true freshman, which, that's a really tough position to be a contributor as a true freshman, but some of these guys, they're going to have that background and that skill set that's going to let them do some good things once they get on campus. We're going to continue to break things down. We're going to circle back a little bit to the spring game, get some more takeaways, just look at the Oklahoma's kind of their roster, the state of it as we go forward. But we're going to do some more of that after the break. First, I'm going to talk to y'all about Built Bar. It's the best tasting protein bar ever. If you haven't tried it, you're missing out. It tastes great, great for you. Low carb, low calorie, low sugar, high in protein. Does great for the macros. It's a really good, meal replacement, pre-workout, post-workout, whatever you need. Tastes great. 100% covered in chocolate. Again, low carb, low calorie, low sugar, high in protein. You're not going to find anything like that. 100% covered in chocolate that tastes like a candy bar. Peanut butter brownie. You will not miss if you get the peanut butter brownie, the mint brownie, coconut almond, coconut brownie chunk, the churro puff. You cannot go wrong. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your next order over at built.com. Check it out at Sam's Club or Walmart as well. So, speaking of just kind of some spring game takeaways, you mentioned Deshaun McCullough a little bit. We didn't really talk much about Kip Lewis either, who led the team in tackles with 11. The dude was just flying around. Now, his body might not be completely ready. Brent Venables even mentioned that in the post-game press conference. But, the fact that he's already out there making plays, had broke into the 2 deep depth chart for the Cheez-It Bowl against Florida State, that's going to be a name to watch at linebacker as well.
Yeah, and, he's doing it against what's going to be one of the best offenses in the country. I know people, they might laugh at that because Dillon Gabriel's still the quarterback, which he's going to be the quarterback the whole season, so people are going to have to get over that. But this is going to be a top 10 offense. Jeff Lebby's always had a great offense. He's at Oklahoma. He's got all of this talent. They continue to add wide receiver talent around Dillon Gabriel. I have no reason to believe that, they're not going to be a top 10 offense this year. But Kip Lewis doing it against this offense. Now, I'm curious to see, though, every year you see somebody break out or have a big spring game, but then they don't put it together in the regular season. I'm curious to see, is Kip Lewis that guy? Or, is this going to be a Kip Lewis that we're going to see throughout all next season?
Or maybe, Preston, is it just a foreshadowing for 2024 and beyond? Maybe it's not for right here and right now in 23, but a Stutzman moves on and we revisit it later. We'll see. What other big takeaways did you have from the spring game? Anything in particular that really, really caught your eye from the spring game?
Yeah, so Jackson Arnold's really good, but I think we all I think we all expected to see that. But even though Jackson Arnold's really good, I still think everybody needs to pump the brakes because he's a true freshman quarterback. And I think it's a little bit easier to do those kind of things against a defense that you see all the time, not against a Oklahoma State or a Baylor. I point those two out because look at what a true freshman Caleb Williams did in the spring game, did in the regular season, but then when he went up against two great defenses, he struggled. And that's kind of what I point out with Jackson Arnold. I think he needs a full year in the system to fine-tune his body, fine-tune his skills a little bit. And then at that point, I think he'll be ready to go once DG moves on. But it's interesting because we got to see a little bit of it, and then DG mentioned it later on, but he's working on his pocket passing, staying in the pocket a little bit more. So I thought that was interesting. I'm curious to see how that develops again going into the fall, because I think if he is able to be a better pocket passer, and because we know he's going to have a great offensive line in front of him. I know they kind of struggled a little bit at times during the spring game, but I don't think we're going to have too many problems with the offensive line going into the regular season, and maybe outside of depth. But I might just be freaking out too much about the depth problems. But yeah, when it comes to Dylan Gabriel being a better pocket passer. I'm curious to see how that works because he's going to have time to throw to those receivers, and those receivers are going to get open.
Speaking of receivers, I think that's one of the areas where there's a bit of a question mark because you come out of the spring game, you feel still good about Jalil Farouk, you still feel good about Drake Stoops, but then you got a kind of a whole mismatched group of wide receivers kind of battling it out at wide receiver 2. And since April 22nd, they've added a Brennan Thompson and look to be the front runners for Jordan Tyson. So they're continually adding names to it. What do you make of the wide receiver 2 kind of depth chart, that position battle as we kind of await summer workouts?
Yeah, so wide receiver 2, I think it belongs to Drake Stoops. So I think your wide receiver 1 is going to be Farouk, and then 2 is going to be Stoops. I'm curious about 3 and 4. Just Jaden Gibson and Nick Anderson step up and be, the tall receivers we thought that they could be? Because I think, especially going into 2024, Jaden Gibson and Nick Anderson have an opportunity with Bryant Wesco and Zion Kearney, because I believe Bryant Wesco will be a part of that class. You could put out, your smallest receiver is going to be 6'3", plus whatever tight end you put out there. Like that could be an insane lineup for the Oklahoma Sooners going into 2024. So I'm curious to see who breaks out at 3 and 4 at that wide receiver depth chart. Is it LV Bunkley Shelton? How do we utilize Brennan Thompson? Is he going to be could we run Farouk and him at the same time and kind of run like a dual jet sweep or something? I don't know. How's that going to work? How creative can this staff get with all of this talent? Because you have a lot of talent. You're going to have to make a lot of guys happy. And we know how it was when Lincoln Riley was here with all of those great wide receivers. You can't all the time give everybody all the touches that they want. So how are they going to make everybody happy? How are they going to utilize them? Who's going to show up and be wide receiver 3 and 4? That's the question I'm watching. I am curious to see if Tyson ends up committing to the University of Oklahoma, because I think he could be actually a bigger addition than people think.
That is a beautiful transition. It's almost like we scripted this. We did not. Preston Gant, by the way, is our guest of the PG show. You can check it out right here on YouTube. If you're on the YouTubes, just search the PG show, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that fun stuff. But so transfer portal. I've been singing the praises that while there's a portion of the fan base that, look, we're not going to ever be crazy about changing times and the transfer portal is not fun. One thing is, it's beautiful for Locked On Sooners. It's beautiful for the PG show. It is a content creation magnet. And so one of the big storylines has been just across the board transfer portal additions. So play this game with me. Let's treat it as though Jordan Tyson is an Oklahoma Sooner. I know that hasn't officially happened yet, but play the hypothetical with me. Two most important offensive transfer portal additions for you, and the 2 most important transfer portal defensive additions for you, because the landscape there has changed a little bit. Who are they?
Like guys that we could go out there and get, or guys that we do have?
Guys that are coming to Oklahoma.
Okay, well, I think Brennan Thompson's definitely got to be up there, because on the offensive side of the ball and just special teams, I think he's going to help provide some ability there to where you don't have to play a Billy Bowman as a kick returner or a punt returner so that he doesn't get hurt. I think he's definitely key. Walter Rouse, people I think overlook the offensive line, but that left tackle position was going to be a question for people this year. That left side of the offensive line in general. I think Walter Rouse is going to definitely help stabilize it. Obviously, on the defensive side of the ball, you have to say McCullough, because, he's that good. He was what was he, like a freshman All-American or something like that? He was absolutely insane. And then Reggie Pearson, because Reggie Pearson, he's able to come in and give Peyton Bowen that buffer year. He's able to maybe help provide him a little tricks, out of his bag. He's able to help teach him a little bit. So I think those are probably the 2 most important on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, we're big Reggie Pearson fans here on the show. We think that the edge that he's going to bring, just the physicality, the way that he plays fast, we saw a little bit of it show up in the spring game. Having that for 12, 13 games, hopefully more in the 23 season will be huge. Deshaun McCullough, obviously, that dude just flies around. He's going to be great. A couple names that we also love, Rondo Bothroyd, just a guy that brings enough production that he could have been drafted in the NFL draft had he decided to go that route. An important edge / interior line piece. And then, I think offensively, you kind of hit the nail on the head with Walter Rouse. We haven't gotten to see him yet. He's still recovering, from an injury, but by fall camp should be ready to go. And that's going to be a huge, huge piece for this team. We saw a lot of Caden Green at left tackle. It's great if Caden Green can come in and win a job, but you really would prefer to rely upon a guy that's got 37, 38 starts under his belt, well over, 2,500 snaps at the collegiate level to be able to plug in there at left tackle. A lot of intriguing options, Josh. One more for me though, is Austin Stogner. We saw what Braden Willis was able to do in this offense when given a full complement of snaps at tight end. You talked about the wide receiver position, how Lincoln Riley and Dennis Simmons, they rotated that wide receiver position in 2021 and nobody was happy. And nobody complained at tight end, but with Austin Stogner and Jeremiah Hall and Braden Willis all splitting snaps, you didn't really get to see somebody kind of take off. Well, in 2022, Braden Willis didn't have to share snaps with anybody and he took off. This year could be a big time year for Austin Stogner.
No, yeah, that's a really good one. I totally forgot about.
Everybody forgets about Austin Stogner
because it's like he's
Everybody
been here. Like, how often do you get a guy transfer out of a program, go somewhere for a year, and then come back? Like, I don't know if we've seen that. But yeah, Rondell Bothroyd's a great one. Honestly, I really like Devon Sears on the defensive line. I really think there's a lot of upside with him. I know people are like, well, he's from Texas State. He hardly performed. I'm like, yeah, but the staff picked him for a reason. I definitely like his size. So yeah, there's when you look at the defensive side of the ball, I don't think the staff made a bad pull out of the transfer portal.
Just big picture question here. Where are you at with Oklahoma football? It seems like most everybody's positive, and there's been the grace year given for Brent Venables' first season and the turnover. But it was a 6-7 season, right? And that doesn't happen at the University of Oklahoma. So where are you at with positivity for this program? How important is 2023 in your mind? What is a reasonable expectation for you?
I think a reasonable expectation is 10 wins. I think they need to win 10 games this year. I know a lot of people say 9, but I look at it and just go, I think the only loss on their schedule, or only 2 losses on their schedule, are to Texas. And I say that because I've been really high on Texas this year. I think their offensive line is incredible, and I think they're going to be in the Big 12 championship game. And not very many times do you see somebody beat somebody twice in a season, but I think Texas might have our number this year. I think they're just that complete. But Oklahoma, I don't think they can afford to lose less than 10 games. There's not with this cupcake schedule. This is like Georgia's schedule, where you have one tough game and then you can continue rolling on. So, that's my expectations. I'm ready to see Oklahoma win a national championship. I'm 26 years old and I've never seen it. I've seen them go to the national championship, but they went in 2000, and I think I was 3 or 4. So I'm not watching football at 3 or 4 years old. So, I'm ready to see us get there. And I think when we go to the SEC, it'll be a little bit harder. And so, I think the playoffs expand next year to 12 teams. There's an opportunity there, but you're going to need to be able to build on it. And if you want to land a guy like Sammy Brown in the recruiting class, and Edric Houston, KJ Bolden, those guys, you're going to have to go out there and win 10 games. You're going to have to show significant improvement across the board. And if you can do that, then I think you have a real shot to go out there and maybe land some of those guys late or flip them late, because they're going to see that development on the team. So that's what we have to see this season. You have to see the development of the team. You have to see them win games. They have to win those close games. Like, you can't just win a game by 3 points. You need to be able to go out there and do it in Oklahoma style by 10, 14 points, maybe even more. So,
speaking of the recruiting trail, Oklahoma is well positioned for several 5-star, a couple 5-star defensive linemen, several other blue chip defensive linemen as well. Williams Nwaneri drops his top 10. Oklahoma's included. Obviously, they seem to be the front runner for the Lee Summit North prospect, but also included Colorado. Prime time. Get away. You're the new Mel Tucker. Get away from Oklahoma. Get away from Oklahoma's prospects. Get away from Kansas. You're not welcome.
Yeah, I don't know that one. I don't know. I'm like, did you just not have 10 teams and you had to find somebody to fill it? Because I talked to somebody who is close to him, and he's not really been a fan of Coach Brian. Like, he went out there, checked the boxes, dotted the I's. But I mean, I'm like, well, did that visit, this last one, go better than we all thought? Like, what's going on there? Like, I don't know. I don't think Colorado's a serious contender. I know Colorado fans will sit here and tell you all day long, oh my gosh, we're in the top 10. Like, but I don't think Williams is taking a visit there, or an official visit. I think because I went back and forth with Will Funk today on the YouTube when they were doing their recruiting corral thing. I think he said Georgia is getting official. Oregon will likely get one, Missouri, Oklahoma. I don't see Colorado landing an official, to be honest. I don't think they're really a player, but it did shock me that he put them in their top 10. I think he could have put maybe a different team in there.
Well, how many of these defensive linemen in this class is Oklahoma going to wind up landing? What's who is Oklahoma when it's all said and done? The dust settles on this 2024 signing class, and I know, we're 7 months away from the early signing period, so a lot can change between now and then. But shoot your shot, my friend. Who's signing with Oklahoma in this class up front?
This is such a hard season. This is such a hard question. Like, I have pondered this question so many times because I'm like, you hear so many good things about how they're in a good spot for David Stone. But for David Stone, there's other factors that are keeping him from committing to the University of Oklahoma. Williams Nwaneri. Like, I think he's here. I think he's Oklahoma all the way. Like, that's kind of what I got. Nigel Smith, I've talked to him. I feel like it's a 50-50 right now, but it's been Oklahoma for so long. He loves the staff. He loves David Stone. He loves Joseph Ajone, who I think is going to be in the class. I mean, we talk like almost every other day at this point. I'm like, but how many of those guys can you really land? So I'm thinking they probably land 4 or 5, just because when you go to the SEC, you need to bring in that much talent with you. And the defensive line and the offensive line, I think, are 2 areas where you got to be able to take, 4 or 5 people, because you're going to have to add that depth. I mean, I looked at the offensive line. I think they could lose 4 or 5 people this season to either graduating out or to the draft. So, I mean, on the defensive line, it's the same way. You're going to have to bring young talent in there. You're going to have to let them develop. So maybe your second year in the SEC, you have a top tier SEC defensive line. So I'm thinking David Stone, William, assuming we can fix those other problems, Williams Nwaneri, Nigel Smith, Joseph Ajone. But I've kind of gone back on that edge rusher because I'm like, well, you got Ross, you've got Logan Thomas, I think you have Owen Waffle. So I'm like, who's potentially going to be that edge? I'm going to go Ross just because it's the Kansas City area and the staff's going to recruit it well. Zadavian Sims, it's a toss-up. I'm going to say he's an Oregon Duck, though.
All right, final question for you, Preston, before we let you get out of here. The player we're not talking enough about for 2023 with the Oklahoma Sooners.
Well, I would have said Josiah Wagner, but everybody's talking about Josiah Wagner now. So I'm going to say Caden Green. I don't think people talk enough about him, especially with what he's been able to do this spring and stepping up for the injured, recovering Walter Rouse. I've got to say Caden Green. He, in his second year for Oklahoma, he's going to be a star. He's going to be a stud. That's a guy that I think could be a first-round pick when it's all said and done.
Well, maybe should have led with this, but Preston Gant has been hanging out with us tonight on Locked On Sooners. Check out his work, The PG Show. Dude, you are crushing it. Love the content over there. Keep it up, folks. Go support him over there. Here's your elevator speech on the way out. Tell folks what they will find inside The PG Show.
Yeah, so do lots of interviews with recruits. I've actually got a couple that I'm editing, putting out. I'm actually going on a bachelor trip this weekend. So tonight's a lot of editing, scheduling videos to go out this weekend. So a lot of recruit interviews. We talk about, especially if they went to Oklahoma, their recent visits, things like that. Give you guys an insight to what that looks like from a recruit standpoint. And we try to mix it up a little bit. We don't try to do just 2023. We're doing 2024 and 2025. And I'm not into the 2026s yet because they're still so far away, but kind of giving you an insight to what those 2 different years look like for them. And then also, we do interviews with current players. I think we've got one with Dalen Smothers coming up, just to kind of work and try to figure that out. And then, of course, we cover all things college football. So I'm trying to cover whatever team is hot at the moment on the recruiting trail, whatever the news is, we're going to talk about it. We're going to make sure you guys stay up to date.
And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Preston, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure y'all go follow Preston on Twitter at The PG Show. Go check him out on YouTube. Subscribe to his channel as well. Get all that Oklahoma Sooners content. Make sure you're following Josh on Twitter at Josh on Ref. Here on Monday through Friday from 9 to noon on 94.7 The Ref in Norman. Follow me on Twitter at John9Williams, and the show is at Locked On Sooners. But until next time, he's Preston Gant. He's Josh Helmer. I'm John Williams. We'll talk to you then. Boomer Sooner.